One of the biggest strengths of these V8 4runners, and something that I haven't really talked about much on this channel up until now, is their towing ability. And the bottom line is that there's not a single 4runner, new or old, even the brand new ones, that can tow as much and as well as these 4th gen V8s. So when the time came for us to go on our honeymoon, and considering that all the border closures and everything, we decided now's as good a time as any to test out the 4runner's towing capabilities, and we borrowed this trailer from my in-laws. And so I packed up my lady and a bunch of our belongings, and we towed this thing across country, all the way from southern Ontario here to British Columbia. We made it all the way to Vancouver Beach, and officially stuck our toes in the ocean. So overall, it ended up being about a 10,000 kilometer round trip, which was definitely putting this thing to the test. Was I confident in the 4runner? Yeah, but any vehicle that's 14 years old and has over 200,000 kilometers on it, I'm a little bit concerned about longevity. So I'm not going to tell you now. Let's make it fun, but I want you to guess what broke down on the 4runner, what needed repairing during this month-long trip that we went on, and comment down below. For those of you that already follow me on Instagram, you already know the answer to this. Keep it quiet, don't ruin it for everybody else, but also, if you don't follow me on Instagram, what are you doing? So, a little bit about the setup here, if you're not already familiar with my 4runner. This is a 2007 4th gen V8. It's a limited model. It's got Fox 2.0 suspension front and rear, OME 895 rear springs, which plays a big role in towing because they are rated for more weight. So this is going to be my experience of towing with the 4runner. Don't expect that a stock 4th gen is going to necessarily behave the same way that this one does, just because of the modifications. So we're running 285 70/17 tires on a 17-inch method wheel. So this setup has always had a little bit of rake still, which has bothered me, but I always thought in the back of my mind, yeah, but if I ever want to use this thing for towing and stuff, it could come in handy. And I was right, because as I just measured and found out, with these rear springs and this trailer, this, by the way, this is about a 19-foot trailer. It weighs at least 3,200 pounds, depending on how much stuff we had loaded in it at the time. Not a heavy trailer, about half of what this thing is capable of towing. So with the weight of that trailer, I just measured, and in the end, we had about 3/4 of an inch of squat in the rear end. So that little bit of rake that's still left, it was riding down the highway almost perfectly level, if not a little bit elevated in the rear still, which made for a super comfortable ride. The Fox suspension on this thing, on all the rough mountain roads and everything, was just a dream. It really helped with those long driving days where we were racking up a lot of miles trying to get somewhere, and it really handled the weight really well. In terms of other modifications to this that matter for towing, it's the 4.7 V8. The only real modifications power-wise, it does have a set of Doug Thorley short tube headers on it, and I am running a Gibson catback exhaust as well. It's a stainless catback, but I'm running all the original catalytic converters, the primaries, secondaries, that's all legit. It's just a catback and a set of headers. So the whole goal of this video is to basically just share with you everything that I learned with, not technically my first time, but one of my first times towing with this 4th gen. I want to give you an idea of what you're in for if you're going to start towing with yours, if you've never towed with it before, if you're just curious, if you're shopping for one of these 4runners. I'm going to give you all the little tips and tricks that I learned after driving across the country with this thing. So the very first and arguably the most important thing that I've learned is the importance of a trailer brake controller. So this trailer does have electric brakes on it, but of course they don't work unless you have a way of controlling them. And I just made the decision kind of last minute before we left, like just a couple days before we left, that if I'm gonna, here's the thing, like the brakes on the 4runner are really strong, and for this kind of a load, just over 3,000 pounds, no problem slowing down, stopping, no brake fade, it's fine. But that's here in southwestern Ontario, and things are pretty flat. Not too dramatic, but it just dawned on me, I'm heading to the Rocky Mountains, and those highways will cook the brakes on a completely stock vehicle that's not towing anything. And we're running bigger, heavier tires, we're lifted, and we're towing a trailer. So I decided to get a brake controller, but again, because I was under the gun time-wise, I didn't have the time to install one and run wiring or take it somewhere to have it done. And so here's what I ended up doing. And this is, of course, not a sponsored video. I'm always very upfront with you guys about that kind of stuff. Some of those are coming, but in this case, I paid for this completely out of pocket. So I got this Curt Bluetooth brake controller. And the thing is, yeah, it is expensive compared to other ones, but the ease of use, in my opinion, it made up for it. So all this does is it just plugs into your factory trailer connection here. This is for your trailer wiring, and it's just like a middleman. You plug the trailer wiring into this Bluetooth connector, and this is the unit here. So you plug your trailer wiring into it, and then it into your truck. Very simple, very straightforward. And this is how you can control it. So you just download the app, and of course you have to tap to accept, do all that stuff. And you can set up a different profile for different setups, whether it's a different trailer or a different truck. So a big benefit here is that you only have to buy one brake controller if you tow with multiple trucks. We just go to Profile 1. And this is your manual override. So if you hold it like this, that applies the trailer brakes all on its own. You let off, and then they let off. I believe this saved us from a really bad situation at one point. Early on in the trip, we were just up in northern Ontario, and we didn't have the trailer loaded in the most balanced way. So we had the mountain bikes on the bike rack on the back, and that added, I don't know what it would have been, maybe 150 pounds or something total. It doesn't seem like a lot, but that's also hanging way out and behind the axle of the trailer. And so it combined with a pretty gnarly crosswind, some steep roads or some steep hills that we were driving on the highways up in northern Ontario, we got into a situation where the trailer started swaying pretty badly. I started to get pretty concerned, and luckily my father-in-law is a former long-distance truck driver. He's retired now, and before we left he gave me this tip of, and it's probably common knowledge that that's what the manual override button is for, but he told me if you end up in a situation where it's swaying and it's about to be out of control and you got kind of a pendulum effect, the best way to get things back under control is stay on the throttle and hit the trailer brakes. And that just pulls the slack back out of the trailer hitch. And that's exactly what I did, and that's exactly what the result was. It got us right back in line, right back under control again. These things are expensive. I think it was like $300 or something like that. In my case, happy to spend it. It really helped out, and it was so easy to use. I don't have to worry about having a big box mounted down here and cutting into the dash to mount it and running the wiring and everything. So anyways, I know I'm going on and on about this thing. If you're considering towing with your 4runner, don't do it without trailer brakes. So as I already mentioned, the load balance is really important if you're going to be towing with a 4runner, because they are a short wheelbase, and this is a small vehicle in comparison to even what's considered a pretty small travel trailer. It's going to get thrown around physically just because of its size. So when you're using a single axle trailer like this, it's really important to keep the weight that you're loading in the front. You want to keep as much tongue weight as you can without the rear end sagging too much. But I ended up having to make the adjustment of getting those bike racks off that rack off the back of the trailer and moving them forward. Luckily we had nothing really in the back of the 4runner, so I folded the seats down and kept them in the back of the 4runner for the rest of the trip. And that made a big difference. We had some big water jugs and stuff with us, and we made sure to store them in the front of the trailer. And from that point on, we were fine. So just be really careful with how you balance your load if you're going to be towing with one of these 4runners. You want to keep a good amount of tongue weight, and you don't want to put anything behind the axle if you don't have to. Now, another question that I'm sure is going to come up is whether I was towing in overdrive or out of overdrive. But the short answer is I did a mixture of both, and it depended on the highway that I was on. If it felt like it would hold overdrive, I would use it. If it was hunting and bouncing back and forth, or there was a lot of climbing or a lot of stopping and starting, I would stay out of overdrive. Another thing that I learned just in feeling out this setup and how it wanted to act under certain situations, it seemed to be happiest when I was traveling about 90 kilometers an hour, or I guess it's probably about 55 miles an hour. It just seemed the most stable there. It would hold a gear really well there, and depending on the weather, the conditions, the roads, 90 kilometers an hour, it always seemed to be able to manage with that, even if there was a crosswind or a steep hill. That was a pretty reasonable speed. Now, Could it go faster than 90? Absolutely. I think on the way home, especially on the flatter spots, we were doing about 120 for quite a long stretch to make up ground. And it was fine. I wouldn't recommend towing that fast with a setup like this, unless you're on really flat ground and you're in control. The other aspect too is that this 4runner, even when it's not towing, it gets thirsty over 100 kilometers an hour. You just start killing your fuel economy aerodynamically. The problem with this trailer is it's not the weight. It's a pretty lightweight trailer, but it's the aerodynamics of it. And this one, even for a travel trailer, it's pretty smooth on top. It's pretty rounded. But there's just no hiding the fact that it's essentially a parachute behind this thing. So trying to really work the truck and run at a higher speed just wasn't worth it for us. I felt 90 kilometers an hour, close to 100 kilometers, so like 55, 60 miles an hour. It was very happy there, and it was able to maintain that speed regardless of the conditions. Another thing that I'm sure going to get a lot of questions about is the fuel economy when towing with this thing. So it's worth noting that with this setup on the 4runner, without towing, just driving around like normal, I usually get a mix of 15 miles per gallon with both city and highway. I got another video about that if you want to check that out. So when I'm not towing, we're about 15 miles per gallon. Now, hooking up this rather small camper trailer, on average, from what I saw, and this is real world calculating, this is not using the computer in the dash or anything, this is hand calculating, I was about 9 miles per gallon for this whole trip. So that translated to, I think it was over $3,000 in fuel on this trip. Mind you, this is a month-long drive, so it definitely added up. But 9 miles per gallon was essentially what we were getting with this setup. Another thing that I noticed was that with this trailer, surprisingly, tow mirrors were not required. I felt fine with just using these factory 4runner mirrors. You see a lot of people with camper trailers with the extended mirrors on their trucks, and I was a little bit concerned about that at first, and these work just fine. Now, keep in mind, as you can see, this trailer, the way that it's set up, is pretty much the same width as the 4runner itself, which made it really easy to tow, really easy to maneuver, really easy for visibility and everything. You sacrifice a little bit of space inside the trailer, but in this case, we had an electric slide out here, which helped. Once we set up, we could slide this out and have some more interior room. But it was definitely worth it for towing. Now, so you can see I'm running these are just the factory 4runner side mirrors, but I do have these little round ones that I've added in, and they helped a bit for being able to see kind of where the tires were placed. The only concern was, when you're stopped on a highway unexpectedly and you're worried about traffic coming around a corner behind you and rear-ending you, I felt like I didn't have quite enough visibility out back. I would have liked to be able to see a little bit more of what's directly behind me if there was a runaway truck or something. The solution that I had for that was actually a little trick that I just kind of figured out for myself. As you're pulling up to the stop traffic, leave yourself a little bit of room, and then as you inch forward, just turn to one side or the other. And in doing that, it doesn't have to be a drastic maneuver either, but just by turning a little bit, suddenly you can see the whole road behind you and what's coming up behind you, at least so you can keep an eye on any traffic that's going to not stop in time and potentially rear-end you. So by doing that trick, just every once in a while when I found myself in that situation, I didn't feel like I needed extended tow mirrors at all with this setup. So that was a really pleasant surprise. Now, if you already own one of these V8 4runners, then you already know that one thing we don't have to be worried about here is towing power. This 4.7 V8 has plenty of power. Power is definitely not an issue here. There's plenty of times we'd be going up like a 7 or 8% grade, and we not only wouldn't have any trouble maintaining speed, but I would actually have to slow down for some of the corners while climbing. So this little doggy wanted to hunt, that's for sure. We were passing full-size trucks, pulling similar trailers, and power was definitely not an issue. Now, the same grades on a downhill were not quite as brag-worthy as the horsepower, but again, the trailer brake controller, I was really glad to have that. But also, on those steeper declines, I made sure to tow out of overdrive then for sure. And surprisingly, the engine braking did a really good job of helping us maintain speed. At one point, we found ourselves on the Coquihalla Highway, which if you watch the show Highway Through Hell, all the tow trucks fixing all the big rigs, wrecks and the ditches and all that stuff, that's like their main highway that all those accidents are caused on. And we drove through that. I think it's nicknamed the Smasher. It's like a snow shed that a lot of people have trouble slowing down for, especially in the wintertime. But we made it down that really steep grade, no problem. I think I only tapped the brakes once or twice that whole way down. And as you'll see, we even got footage of one of the big rigs cooking their brakes, and I'm not sure how much of the smoke you can see on camera, but it was good timing for us to be there at that point to show just what kind of a toll a hill like that can take on your brakes. So the thing is, the 4Runner does a good job of braking, but again, it's still not the same as a full-size pickup. It's not going to be like a Tundra or one of the big American trucks. But I was surprised with how much the engine braking did help with maintaining speed. But it's definitely not something that you want to just be relaxed about. I always had in the back of my mind that I'm not going to be able to stop like normal, so I was planning ahead. I was making sure that I was slowing down way in advance for some of the steeper corners and really just paying attention to the road. You still need to exercise caution as far as braking goes with towing with a 4Runner like this. Now, I've talked about the downsides of towing with a smaller vehicle like the 4Runner here, but there are also some upsides too. And one of my favorite parts about using this as a tow rig was being able to maneuver in and out of tight spaces with this trailer. So we were able to get into some pretty tight campsites with no problem. Backing it up was a breeze. We even stayed in a couple of sites that were technically only meant for tent camping, and we were able to squeeze in without any problems. So that was a really big benefit, to being able to maneuver this thing in and out of campsites, but also we ended up like downtown Winnipeg, downtown Calgary, and some really, really busy cities that it would have been kind of stressful with a full-size pickup truck trying to maneuver through some of the corners and some of the tight roads and construction and stuff. And this was a really, really nimble setup, so that was definitely playing to the strengths of the smaller 4Runner. The other benefit of towing with the 4Runner, which I'm sure you can guess, once we made it to some cooler areas, we detached the trailer and left it in camp, and we were able to go out exploring with it. And we were able to take some Forest Service roads and some other off-road trails to go exploring, and we saw some really cool sights and some really cool scenery that a full-size truck definitely wouldn't have been able to squeeze through some of those trails. Now, I already know, as you guys are watching some of this off-road footage, you're going to give me a hard time about it being so mild. Okay, you're right. But I promised my wife that as we're thousands of kilometers away from home and wheeling up by ourselves with nobody to pull us out, we kind of made a funny deal that I wouldn't do anything more than 30% of what the 4Runner was capable of. And we didn't want to take any chances of having some hard times there, so we're definitely taking it easy and going slow. We were able to still get out and explore and see some really cool remote spots, but we weren't exactly rock crawling or doing any heavy mudding, so give me a little slack on that. But we still had lots of fun. Still got plenty dirty, and got to go to some pretty cool spots. So I guess we'll end the video off with a few modifications that I'm really glad that I did, and also a couple that I kind of wish that I did. So the first one that I'm really glad that I did was installing these lights that I put in the rear hatch for camping. And this wasn't the reason why I put them in, but these guys right here, I wish I would have done an install video on them, but they're in now, so it's too late. But anyways, these were so helpful when we were hooking and unhooking the trailer at nighttime, because there was quite a few times when we would get into camp pretty late and it'd be pitch black already, and having the lights turned on and being able to see what we were doing down here was such a lifesaver. And again, that was just kind of a happy accident. I didn't really install those for that purpose, but man, I'm glad we did. The other mod that I'm really glad I did was the Doug Thorley headers. And I've always been preaching that, peak horsepower and torque is not that big of a gain with them. There is a bit of an improvement there, but it's the area under the curve that you really see a big improvement when you upgrade the headers on these things. And so that's typically between like 3,000 and maybe 5,000 RPM, right in that mid-range. And guess what? When you're towing a trailer like this, 90% of your time is spent right in that range of the RPMs. And so that's where you actually see like a 30 horsepower or 30 foot-pounds of torque gain with the headers, and that's right in that sweet spot. When you're climbing a hill or you're just trying to get up to speed from a stop, this thing had so much power right where I needed it that it was like those headers were designed for towing. And again, not the reason why I installed those, but I'm really glad that I had them. And now for the mods that I wish I would have done. The first one I'm kind of kicking myself for is not installing a backup camera when I did the head unit in the 4runner. And I had everything apart. It would have cost me like maybe an extra $100 to put a decent backup camera in. And I probably would have mounted it just up here under the wing or something somewhere, looking down at the hitch. And I didn't, because I thought, well, you know, I've got no problem seeing out my mirrors to reverse, and I don't really need a backup camera. And that was true until I went on a month-long trip that involved hooking and unhooking this trailer a lot, and being able to line up that trailer hitch. It would have been a lot easier if I had a reverse camera. Instead, luckily I had my wife there to spot me and guide me back, but that wouldn't have been an issue at all if I would have just gone ahead and installed that backup camera. So I think I might still do that in the future now. I'll just open everything back up and wire a backup camera to that Pioneer head unit. But I guess I learned my lesson there. That would have been good to have. And the only other thing that I wish I would have done to the 4runner, well, I guess to the setup as a whole, would be a weight distributing hitch. And as you can see, we're just running a regular trailer hitch here. I think as far as stability goes and some of the sway issues that I told you about, I wouldn't really call them issues. It's just, if we had the load leveling bars, I think that would have helped as far as stability. We were safe either way, but I think we would have been able to get away with just not worrying about it as much and not being as careful about sway if we would have had a weight distributing hitch. Again, this setup towed perfectly fine, and we, aside from that one time, which was because I had it loaded improperly, really, everything else was very stable. It was very stable at speed. I'd be cruising down the highway with just a pinky on the steering wheel. It was totally fine, but if I was going to be doing a lot of towing more regularly, I think I would probably do a weight distributing hitch. So anyways, guys, that's pretty much it. That's everything that I learned from our cross-country trip towing a trailer with the 4runner. Also, as you can see, the 4runner's not looking too bad. It's fairly clean again, and that's because I had to spend quite a bit of time getting it cleaned back up. So I already shot that video too. I'm going to be releasing that hopefully soon as well. But I hope you guys found this interesting. It's kind of a rare chance to be able to put that many kilometers on a setup towing like this. So I wanted to try and document it as much as I could for you guys. And if you have more questions, make sure you put them down in the comments below, or you can always DM me on Instagram as well. I'm officially back from my month-long honeymoon, guys, so that means new articles on the site coming soon, and hopefully new Toyota videos coming to the channel as well. So thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one. Guys, I almost forgot and left you hanging, but in 32 days and over 10,000 kilometers, we had 0 breakdowns, 0 repairs. The 4runner just kept on going. Not even a hiccup. So definitely a testament to the reliability of these things. They definitely live up to the hype. I was not kind to this thing. Coming home, again, if you're following me on Instagram, you'll see I was 5,300 kilometers overdue for the oil change on this thing. So that was over 10,000 kilometers on one oil change. And she's still purring like a kitten.